Hey guys, welcome to today's video where we're going to be going over 5 unbreakable NFL records. Before we get started, please like and subscribe. It really helps my channel grow. And on a quick side note, if you don't already know, I've been writing some articles for theupdog.com, which is basically a sports article website where anyone under the age of 22 can post articles on any sports topic that they're interested in. If y'all are interested on reading some of the articles on the website, there's some really interesting articles up. Or if you guys are under the age of 22 and are interested in doing some sports writing, then you can check out theupdog.com via the link in the description down below. There's some really interesting articles up, and we're coming out with new content daily. But now let's dive into the video, and I hope you enjoy. So as I've already said, we're going to be going over 5 unbreakable NFL records in today's video. These aren't necessarily the most unbreakable records in the NFL, but at the end of the day, these are some of my favorite NFL records that probably won't be broken. Let's start off with Devin Hester and his most career punt return touchdowns at 14. Now, you may be saying 14 career punt return touchdowns, that doesn't sound like a lot. But if you compare that to other punt return touchdown guys like Eric Metcalf or Brian Mitchell, he's just past it. Devin Hester is in a completely another realm. He's 4 more career punt return touchdowns than Eric Metcalf, and the closest guy to Hester that's played in the 21st century is Darren Sproles with 7. 7 compared to 14. I mean, Devin Hester is known as the greatest kick returner of all time, punt returner of all time, do-it-all return of all time, and that's a fact. I mean, at the end of the day, it just is. He is by far better than anyone else when it comes to punt returns, and there's no one even close to it. As I said, the closest guy to him that played most of their career in the 21st century is Darren Sproles, and Devin Hester for the Bears was one of the best kick returners and punt returners ever. He's a 4-time Pro Bowler and a 3-time All-Pro member, and even if we just get away from the touchdowns for a second, this guy led the league in punt return yards twice in his career, and also he led the league in kick return yards twice in his career too. So this guy was an elite punt returner, an elite kick returner. And I mean, 14 career punt return for touchdowns doesn't sound like a lot, but at the end of the day, when you compare it to second place or third place, I mean, 4 or 5 punt return touchdowns over an entire career is actually a big deal. So at the end of the day, I think Devin Hester's 14 career punt return touchdowns is something that will never be broken again. As I said, Darren Sproles is the last guy to play most of his career in the 21st century to come even close, and he's still 7 touchdowns away. I mean, Darren Sproles would have had to double his punt returns touchdowns to get to Devin Hester. And at the end of the day, with Devin Hester, it kind of just goes without saying he's the best punt returner of all time. But now, though, let's go on to something that might be a little bit more interesting. And I'm going to go with Tom Brady's 6 Super Bowl wins as a starting quarterback. So when it comes to quarterbacks, there are only a few that have won more than 1 Super Bowl. But when it comes to winning more than 2 Super Bowls, there's only 4 quarterbacks to have done it. That's Troy Aikman, Joe Montana, Terry Bradshaw, and, of course, Tom Brady. All of those quarterbacks were, of course, dynasty leading quarterbacks. Aikman with the Cowboys, Montana obviously with the 49ers, Bradshaw with the Steelers, and obviously Brady with the Patriots. But Bradshaw and Montana are tied for 4, and they're still 2 behind Tom Brady's 6. But let's not talk about dynasty quarterbacks. Let's talk about the next quarterback that, in theory, could win 6 or 7 Super Bowls. For me, that would be Patrick Mahomes. I don't think it's crazy to suggest Patrick Mahomes. But still, I mean, Mahomes is, yes, he's on the younger side, but at the end of the day, he's still won 1 Super Bowl. He still has 5 to tie Brady and 6 to beat Brady. And Brady won 6 over the course of about 20 seasons. I mean, 6 Super Bowl wins is ridiculous. But you know what's even more ridiculous, I think, is his 9 Super Bowl starts. That's more than any other quarterback alive. And the next highest would be John Elway with 5. Brady started 4 more Super Bowls than Elway has. And it's not even close, right? If you added all the appearances that Bradshaw was in the Super Bowl or all the appearances that Joe Montana was in the Super Bowl, with all the appearances that John Elway was in the Super Bowl, you would tie Tom Brady. You wouldn't even beat Tom Brady. So I think that Tom Brady's wins in the Super Bowl, as well as his appearances in the Super Bowl, will never be broken again. I mean, Tom Brady led the biggest and most successful dynasty in NFL history, and especially with the way that competition is growing in today's NFL, with a lot of different teams being able to have really, really successful seasons and successful players and successful quarterbacks, I don't think we'll ever see another Tom Brady. I just don't think it will happen. I mean, yes, the Kansas City Chiefs are building something really, really special. But, I mean, Patrick Mahomes, great quarterback, elite quarterback. But at the end of the day, I mean, he's no Tom Brady when it comes to being in the Super Bowl, winning 6 Super Bowls. I mean, in theory, Mahomes could do it over his next 10, 15 seasons. But at the end of the day, I mean, Brady making it to 9 Super Bowls and winning 6 of them, for me, that's never going to be broken. Now, though, let's go on to my favorite record here, which is LaDanian Tomlinson's most ever touchdowns in a single season by a position player. So back in 2006, LaDanian Tomlinson arguably had the best season ever by a position player. He rushed for over 1,800 yards, 28 touchdowns, and he added 56 catches for 508 receiving yards and 3 receiving touchdowns. Those 28 rushing touchdowns led the league that season, and those 3 receiving touchdowns did not lead the league in receiving touchdowns, but combined, they made 31 total touchdowns for LaDanian Tomlinson in 2006, which is an NFL record for single-season touchdowns. So let's see some of the other guys on that list. In second place is Shaun Alexander with 28 touchdowns. Okay, that's not too far off, right? 3 or so touchdowns, but Priest Holmes is at 27. Marshall Faulk is at 26. But all these guys I'm saying to you, they haven't played since the early 2000s. The only guy to come relatively close in the last 5 or so seasons is Todd Gurley, who in 2018 had 21 touchdowns. But that's still 10 touchdowns off from LaDainian Tomlinson. For me, a running back would have to be the guy to do this, just because the amount of goal line carries a running back would get. And a true power running back could probably have 15 or 16 rushing touchdowns in a season. I mean, it's not unheard of. I mean, last season, Derrick Henry did it. Last season, Aaron Jones did it. And they're definitely running backs that could tally up a lot of rushing touchdowns. But in today's game, 16, 17, 18 rushing touchdowns is a lot. We're back a few seasons ago. 15, 16 rushing touchdowns, yes, it was a lot. But at the end of the day, it wasn't unheard of to have 22, 23, 24 touchdowns in a season. So I think that 31 touchdowns by LT back in 2006 is never going to be broken. I mean, you'd have to average 2 touchdowns a game for an entire season to beat it. And that's just not going to happen. It just isn't. I mean, you'll occasionally see a player have 2 touchdowns in a game, maybe 3 touchdowns, maybe even 4 touchdowns. That occasionally happens. But to average 2 touchdowns each game for an entire season, and to be healthy for an entire season too, especially at a position like the running back position, is almost impossible. I mean, especially with running backs not being able to be as productive later in their careers, it gives them less of a shot for generational running backs to do it. And I mean, even if you look at Todd Gurley, I don't think he's ever going to come close to those 21 touchdowns again. And at the end of the day, with how the NFL is moving towards passing and throwing the football a lot more, unless Christian McCaffrey is going to get 15 receiving touchdowns and like 15 or 16 or even 17 rushing touchdowns, I don't think he's ever going to come close. So at the end of the day, LaDainian Tomlinson, his ability as a true running back and as a pass catcher too, is why he got 31 total touchdowns. But at the end of the day, those 31 total touchdowns are nearly impossible to beat it. In today's NFL, if you score 19, 20, 21 touchdowns in an entire season, that's a lot of touchdowns. So having 31 touchdowns and averaging over 2 touchdowns a game in 2020 is ludicrous. Now, though, let's move on to career playoff wins by a coach. And in that regard, it's going to be Bill Belichick with 31 wins. But for me, that record's never going to be broken. And here's why. If you look at the number 2 most playoff winningest coach of all time, that's Tom Landry with not 30 wins, but 20 wins. That's 11 less wins than Bill Belichick. But let's give you an example of a modern day coach like Andy Reid. 15 playoff wins. 15. That's 16 less than Bill Belichick. If Andy Reid made the playoffs for the next 4 years, and he didn't get a bye week in the playoffs, and he won the Super Bowl each year, he would only tie Bill Belichick if Bill Belichick never won another playoff game. Just think about that. If Andy Reid won the Super Bowl for the next 4 years and didn't make a playoff bye, he'd only tie Bill Belichick. Belichick has more than double the amount of playoff wins than Andy Reid. And, I mean, the next guy that's still active in today's NFL as a coach is Pete Carroll with 11 playoff wins. Then you have John Harbaugh at 10 playoff wins. And if you think about that, Harbaugh has 3 times less playoff wins than Belichick. That just shows how elite Belichick is. I mean, Belichick has won the most Super Bowls out of any head coach ever, and that's why he's the greatest coach of all time. Yes, I'm a Dolphins fan, and I'm saying that because I know how great a coach Bill Belichick is. But for me, those playoff wins will never even be touched. I mean, Tom Landry is a Hall of Fame coach. Don Shula is a Hall of Fame coach, and they barely scratched 20 wins. Landry got 20, Shula got 19, and Belichick has 11 more than Landry ever had, and he has 12 more than Shula ever had. Plus, he's got 16 more than any current coach. And if you just keep that trajectory and just understand how hard it is to have dynasties in the NFL, then you'll understand why that Bill Belichick's record of 31 career playoff wins will never be beaten. Plus, he'll probably tack onto that in the next few seasons. And although he doesn't have Brady anymore, I still think Belichick will be able to tack on a few wins to that win column. Those 31 playoff wins will never be beaten ever again. Because, at the end of the day, like in today's NFL game, dynasties are hard to create. Playoff quarterbacks and having dynastic quarterbacks are hard to find. And you really need a quarterback like Tom Brady to win you a ton of Super Bowls. And at the end of the day, Bill Belichick had that, and it's going to be hard to find that for any other coach in the NFL. Andy Reid has a shot with Patrick Mahomes, but Andy Reid's probably going to have to coach for the next 10 seasons, and Patrick Mahomes is still probably going to have to be super successful during that time to even come close to where Bill Belichick is. So all in all, I think Bill Belichick's record of 31 playoff wins will never be even touched. Now, though, let's go on to my final record, which is Brett Favre's 336 career interceptions, which is the most of all time. In second place is George Blanda with 277 career interceptions. And if you do the math, that's around 50 or so more interceptions from Favre than Blanda in his career. But how about we do this too? The closest active player to beating Favre's record is actually Drew Brees, which is kind of surprising because you think of Drew Brees as a big completion percentage guy. But at the end of the day, before the 2020 season that started, he's had 237 career interceptions, which is exactly 99 less career interceptions than Brett Favre ever had. Favre has played 20 seasons in the NFL, and Brees is going into his 20th season. Just take that in for a second. Plus, Brett Favre's 336 career interceptions is going to be impossible to break for another reason. Just look at Jameis Winston last season. In Tampa Bay last year, he threw for 30 touchdowns and 30 interceptions. Those are very similar to what Brett Favre has done in the past in his career. I mean, he is an 11-time Pro Bowler, a 3-time All-Pro member, a former Super Bowl champion, and a 3-time MVP. That doesn't mean he didn't have any bad seasons. I mean, he used to put up a ton of touchdowns and a ton of interceptions, and I guess his 2008 season is kind of comparable in a way. That season, obviously, towards the end of his career when he was 39 with the Jets, but he threw for 22 touchdowns and 22 interceptions. But throughout his career with Green Bay, I mean, he was constantly putting up a ton of touchdowns and a lot of interceptions. In 2003, that was a Pro Bowl season for him. He had 32 touchdowns and 21 interceptions. So though he wasn't as consistently bad as Jameis Winston has been in the past, it doesn't mean that he didn't throw a ton of interceptions. But think about Jameis Winston for a second. Threw 30 touchdowns, 30 interceptions. And then next season, he's not even on the Buccaneers anymore. He's not even a starting quarterback in the league, but rather he's sitting behind Drew Brees. Look at that. That's very interesting. Because at the end of the day, if you're a quarterback and you're throwing a ton of interceptions, you're not going to be able to be a starting quarterback for 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 20 seasons and continue to compile up interceptions. Teams don't want you if you're throwing 30 interceptions in a season. Although Brett Favre didn't throw 30 interceptions every season. I mean, if he threw 30 interceptions every season for 20 years, I mean, he would have put up 600 interceptions. He didn't do that. But at the end of the day, if you're a quarterback who's in the league for 10, 12, 13 seasons, as a starting quarterback, chances are you're not throwing 30 interceptions or 25 or 20 interceptions each season because teams want you to keep the ball and don't turn the ball over. If you look at all the great quarterbacks of all time, or at least most of them, guys like Aaron Rodgers, Tom Brady, Drew Brees, they don't really turn the ball over that much. Yes, Drew Brees is the active leader in interceptions before the 2020 season that started, but at the end of the day, he doesn't turn the ball over that much either. So just take that into mind. Think about that for a second and realize that in today's NFL, if you're throwing 30 interceptions, 20 interceptions in a year, teams aren't going to want you as your starting quarterback, and you're not going to have the opportunity to throw as many touchdowns and as many interceptions as Brett Favre ever did. Therefore, if you look at Brett Favre's stats, I mean, at the end of the day, he still threw 508 touchdowns and 336 interceptions, which, yeah, it's not great, the interceptions, but at the end of the day, he threw so many touchdowns. And in this day and age, teams aren't going to want you if you're throwing that many interceptions. And if you throw that many interceptions, you're not going to get the chance to continue being an interception guy and continue throwing the interceptions because you won't have a starting job in the NFL. That's just the case. Teams want you to keep the ball. Teams want you to not turn over the football. And in today's NFL, if you're throwing a ton of interceptions, you're not going to have a starting job and you're not going to be able to beat Brett Favre's interception total. So those are my 5 records that I don't think will be ever broken. I mean, there are a lot of other records that probably won't be broken, like Emmitt Smith's rushing total or Jerry Rice's total touchdowns. But at the end of the day, those were my 5 favorite records that I don't think will be beaten. And I just thought that they'd be interesting to share and to get some of my analysis behind and to understand why I enjoy those records so much. So at the end of the day, I hope you enjoyed the video. And also, if you want to check out theupdog.com, that will be in the link down below in the description. If you guys have any comments, leave those in the comment section down below. If you have any ideas on any future videos, leave them in the comment section down below too. If you want to check out my Instagram, that will be in the link down below in the description. And as I said, I hope you enjoyed the video. And until next time, see ya.